cream buns! Today, I'll be showing you how I create 3D backgrounds for gacha videos using the one-point perspective method. The background I will be making is the main street of 𝚃𝚑𝚅𝚗𝚏 from my upcoming series Life of Rouge. Let's get started. First, set your brush to the pencil tool. I like to make the colour a mid to light grey so the later stages are easier to see. Use the ruler tool to mark a spot where you will put the vanishing point. This is an area where all other parts of this background will join together to give the illusion of being three-dimensional. It's important that this is done first. Now, we must begin making the frame that will be used as a guide to show where different parts of the background will be located. Begin by adding a vertical and horizontal line that intersect at the vanishing point, then continue to divide the space with more lines as desired. I like to divide the canvas into 16 parts. For example, in this picture you can see that the line of the street creates a similar shape. This can be done with any background. Next, you'll want to mark out the areas where details such as buildings, sidewalks, and intersections will be located. Remember, the parts of the walls that are facing you must always be horizontal and parallel to each other in this particular method. All objects that you draw in this background must line up with the vanishing point. Imagine a shape like this, where any lines you draw will match up with this curve. As I begin to make this street, observe the ways in which I use the lines. Notice how I line everything up in a way that is realistic to how elements of a street would look in real life. If you need to make a thinner area, simply divide the shape again as required. When creating a sidewalk on the side of the road, be sure to align it with the frame. It should be slightly deviated from parallel, going outwards from the other lines. I'm making each individual part a different colour so that it's easier to see. I'm also doing each of them on different layers for easy grouping. You don't have to make your street look exactly like mine, so feel free to get creative. I'm using my work as an example of the sorts of things you can do with this method. If two structures are directly opposite each other, you can use the ruler tool to draw a horizontal line from the one you've already made to where you want to draw the other one. As I mentioned before, the gaps between the buildings are made up of parallel horizontal lines. This is because these walls are directly facing the viewer. Here's a tip. Imagine yourself walking down this street. Does anything seem out of place? If it does, then you can fix it. Once you are finished with that, we can now move on to the next stage. I'm going to add a second story to the buildings that need it. This can be done using the same method as before. And now we will add the roofs. I like to do this in different shapes to make it more interesting. For triangular roofs, mark the exact middle of the wall where the end will be. This should align with the top point of the triangle. From there, you can draw out the other sides. Since the rest of these buildings have flat roofs, I'm going to be adding a little bit of trim to the top to add some detail. Time to add details. To make windows, angle the lines the same way as the wall the side is closest to. If the line is in the middle of the wall, then make the line more horizontal. This gives the illusion that the window is attached to a 3D wall. This area here is a surf shop, so I am putting surfboards and a mannequin wearing swimwear in the window. I will return to this window later. For now, I'm going to remain on the same layer and add details on the other window. Things are simpler this way, as when the details are added, such as the mannequin, they will have to be another colour so they can easily be seen. It's a good idea to add details that help identify what kind of buildings you are drawing. I have added an open sign to this window, as this is a fish and chip shop and they often have these out the front. This is a cafe, so I will add a potted palm plant to make it look calm and inviting. I'm giving this pot a sort of modern look. It'll look wide at the top and then thinner at the bottom. Now we will be moving on to the upper layer of the details. For this layer, I'm going to be using the colour purple, as it contrasts well enough to the pink used in the bottom layer that I'll be able to see any details I put here. This will also make it easier during the line art stage. When drawing plants, it's a good idea to have a picture of one to reference so that it looks accurate. During the making of this tutorial, I had my phone next to me with all my chosen reference images to scroll through when I needed them. Google is also a valuable tool to use. Be sure to pay attention to all the bends and curves of the leaves, as well as other unique aspects. Now, I'm going to draw in the surf shop mannequin. I decided to give her a fashionable pose, like one that you would find on an actual mannequin in real life. This pose is supposed to help her show off the clothes that she'll be wearing. When constructing the pose, make sure to pay attention to the center of gravity of the object. I will go into further detail about poses in another tutorial at a later date. Now, let's begin the line art phase. This is a simple and straightforward step, so I'll keep this as brief as possible. You'll want to start by equipping the hard dip pen tool at thickness 5.5, using these settings. Use the line tool to begin drawing over the larger straight details. Next up, we will be creating the road and the horizon line. For this step, use the brush thickness 2.0. Now all you gotta do is trace over what you've already drawn. Next, add details such as the sidewalk, roofing, windows, and doors. For this step, use the brush thickness 4.5. The reason we use different brush thicknesses for each part is so that the drawing looks more dynamic. It can also help distinguish between each material. And it can add an extra layer of quality to the final artwork. Just like with the sketch, make different areas different colours so you can see it more easily. The trim on these buildings is kind of like that old-fashioned one that you can get. I honestly don't know the name of it, but I'll put up a picture right now. You'll notice that I'm adding lines in the middle of them. That's to accentuate both the shape of it and to also show where the shadows will be in the future. Because as you can see by the image, they kind of have like a bend in them. Yeah. Now, we will move on to the smaller details. Be sure to use a different colour for this one as well. For the top of the vase, I've made sure to use the ellipse tool, as drawing a circle that's perfect without the tool can be very difficult, so make sure to use your guidelines. Now, since the plant is directly above the vase, I'm going to use a different colour for that again because I need to be able to see that, so I'm doing green for this one because it's a plant. For smaller details, I played around with the various line thicknesses. You don't have to use any specific size for these areas, since the decorations you decide to use might be different and will look nicer with a specific size of your choosing. Sometimes it can take a while to get the perfect line, so don't be afraid to keep undoing it and redoing it until you find the perfect shape. Now, the reasonable person in me says that you should be using typography for the sign, but now, you see, that wouldn't be any fun. I like to do things the difficult way, so I just drew it from scratch. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend actually typing it out, but since I have a death wish and I really like the writing to look exactly like how I want, I drew it. But don't do that. Hands are honestly a massive pain in the butt to draw, so if you're doing a mannequin, feel free to just do little stubs at the end of the wrists because, honestly, this killed my hand. My hand is now dead. It no longer exists, it just fell off. Be sure to erase any overlapping lines to keep things neat and tidy. So I may or may not have actually forgotten to do the doors, so I just went back and did those. And with that, we are now finished with the line art. Now all you want to do is just get rid of the sketch layer underneath and then tidy up any stray lines that you see. Let's add colouring and shading to bring this scene to life. Begin by adding the base colours. It can be any palette you wish. To make the colours look nice together, use softer tones and low saturation. The cafe building is made of bricks, so if you also wish to have a building made of bricks, be sure to use a burgundy or mahogany colour for the base. Now, I will add details. For the brick wall, I am drawing a brick shape using the hard dip pen in a colour slightly lighter than the wall behind it. Make sure to do this on a separate layer. Once you have your brick shape, copy-paste more around the wall using the perspective form setting. Place them sporadically around the wall for a minimalistic look. It can also be done realistically, but this is the style I prefer to use. Make sure the bricks line up with the framework we created at the start, so the wall looks 3D. Now, let's add texture to the road. I begin by creating a layer above it and clipping it. I'm using the colour dropper to grab the tone I want from one of my previous drawings, since each background for my series must match each other. Be sure to use the acrylic opaque brush for this step, since the texture it creates looks a lot like tarmac, the material used to make roads. Add soft shadows against the curb to give the illusion that the road is slightly below the sidewalk. Now in a lighter colour, use the same tool to make small blotches along the surface of the road. They should be larger at the front and become smaller as they go further back. Now set their blending mode to multiply and turn their opacity down. Next, you'll want to grab the coarse pencil tool. Use another light colour to make a rough zigzag along the road. Once that's done, turn the opacity down. Now our road looks more like a road. I'll now do a similar method for the sidewalk, except this time we will just use the coarse pencil in a lighter colour and turn its opacity down. Once I've done that, I begin to add shading to the smaller details. For the cafe plant, I'm adding some extra dimension to the soil and leaves using the acrylic opaque too. I'm also adding a marble texture to the pot, since I think that would look quite interesting and fancy. To make this texture, simply add some irregular lines in a slightly darker colour. This will help to create the illusion of the wavy patterns within a marble surface. Next, you'll want to use the smudge tool to carefully warp and blur the lines to make them softer. I decided to play around with colour spots to give it some extra depth. This step isn't compulsory, but I find it helps it look more pastel and aesthetic. To make the marble more realistic, I'm adding some little cracks into its surface to give it some wear and tear. Make it white and try to let it follow the shape of the smudges from the previous step. Now, turn down the opacity until it blends to your liking. Next, I thought I'd add some extra detail to the windows by drawing some glass. Use a layer that is above any objects that are inside the window and cover it completely in blue. Add some reflected light using a lighter blue and the airbrush tool. Now turn down the opacity to make the window pane see-through. Next, I'm adding some text to the specials board outside the fish and chip shop. I'll be writing down the specials for the day to give this scene a more lively feel. Since it's a chalkboard, I'm using the chalk duster font in white, combined with the coarse pencil tool for details. Keep in mind the way the board is facing, and adjust any details accordingly. Next up is the open sign. This is a neon sign that will glow during the nighttime scenes, however, during the day it will be a simple vibrant shade. Finally, I will add a sun and clouds to the sky. For the sun, I use the airbrush tool in a soft yellow. For the clouds, I use the fade dip pen tool in white. I shade the underside with a soft purple. Before I finish, I like to check around the canvas to find any imperfections and fix them. I also add colour to the line art. And now we're finished! This is my current method of drawing backgrounds for my videos. I hope this tutorial was useful to you and that you enjoyed the video. This background is for my upcoming Gacha animated series, Life of Rouge. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell to watch full episodes when they release. With that said, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again in my next video. Bye!